All right, so I'm going to talk to you about the geologic time scale for a moment. The geologic time scale is a much bigger concept than it appears here on this page. Basically, geologists have taken the history of the Earth and dividing it up into smaller sections so that when they're talking about a certain chunk of time or when they're sharing information about what they study, other geologists, other scientists know what they're talking about. These words are used in other sciences like biology as well when you talk about the history of life here on the planet. And basically, the Earth itself is 4.5 billion years. So if we just try to remember the number, age of everything, it would be overwhelming. Instead, we put these names on the different chunks of time. So the first thing I want you to know is that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. So just kind of adding that over in the corner so we have perspective about the age of the Earth. The top of this diagram is the oldest and the bottom is the youngest. It's today. We're going to start over with eons. Now, an eon is a very large chunk of time representing billions of years. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. The Precambrian is about 4 billion years old. It represents 88% of the Earth's history. And the symbol is a lowercase p, a capital C with a little line through it. So geologists will use that PC, that Precambrian, when they make maps to show, hey, these rocks are from the Precambrian. Now, 88% of the Earth's history is a really long time. The other 12% is known as the Phanerozoic, which means life. This phrase, zoic, you see it several times. It's like zoo, like animals, like life. And we're talking about a variety of life in the last 12% of history, representing about 500 million years, which is the same as 500 million years. Now, the Precambrian is divided up into 3 time periods. Time periods are, let's say tens of millions of years. The Hadean is the oldest. The Hadean is first. The name comes from Hades, the god of the underworld, and the idea is that the early Earth would have been hellish. It would have been molten rock. We did not have oceans. We did not have an atmosphere, really. So you would not want to take a time machine back to the Hadean. The symbol for the Hadean is a capital H. Just a capital H, nothing fancy. The Archean comes next. By the Archean, we had a moon. Oceans were starting to form. We started to form an atmosphere, gaining water from volcanoes, from comets. Archean comes from the same base word as archaic, which just means old, or you think of William Shakespeare's English as archaic. No one really talks like that anymore. It's outdated. The Archean symbol is a capital A. And then comes the Proterozoic. Proterozoic, the pro means before, zoic means life, so we're saying really before life. We did have some single-celled organisms, we had bacteria, we did have some very primitive life forms that were in the ocean during the Proterozoic, but we did not have a wide variety of life forms like you and I would recognize today. The symbol for Proterozoic is a capital P, and then you turn the stem of that P into a little R. And you could say that Proterozoic is like early life. We find our first fossils really from this time, but it would have been things that are sort of like jellyfish. Not a lot of structure to them. Now you notice that this line changes from gray to white here. The Cambrian is often referred to as the Cambrian explosion. This is when life really took off as we know it. We switch now to an era called the Paleozoic. The Phanerozoic is broken up into 3 parts. Paleozoic, old life, Mesozoic, middle life, Cenozoic, recent life. So the Paleozoic starts with the Cambrian, about 500 million years ago. The symbol is the same as with our Precambrian. It's a capital C with a little line through it. The Ordovician is an O, Silurian's an S, Devonian's a D. These 4 times represent when water was really the place to find life. You would go to the oceans for these 4 time periods and you would find a wide variety of organisms both stuck to the ground, floating in the water, or actively swimming. We had a large variety of life, starting with the Cambrian. Now, when we get to the Mississippian and the Pennsylvanian, you notice that they are tied to this thing called the Carboniferous, here in parentheses. Now, the Carboniferous is used universally, like the whole planet uses Carboniferous to represent this time period where our coal deposits formed. But scientists in America have recognized that the Mississippi coal and the Pennsylvania coal deposits are different. You can think of Mississippian as early Carboniferous and Pennsylvanian as late Carboniferous. The symbol for Mississippian is an M. Symbol for Pennsylvanian is a paragraph symbol, a double P. If we took a time machine back to the Mississippian and the Pennsylvanian, we would find life up on land. We would find some primitive plants. We'd find a lot of insects. We'd find millipedes that are 6 feet long, dragonflies with 3-foot wide wingspans, spiders as big as house cats. So there was a lot of activity up on land now, starting with the Mississippian. The Permian is the last time period of the Paleozoic. The Permian symbol is a capital P and a little cross at the bottom. The Permian experienced the biggest extinction in history. At the end of the Permian, there was some changes to the atmosphere, some changes to the climate, and it changed the chemistry of the ocean. 90% of everything that was alive at the start of the Permian went extinct, never to be found again. So that's the biggest extinction, primarily in the oceans, but also on land. Because it was such a big extinction, we switched over to a new era called the Mesozoic, which means middle life. This is really the time of dinosaurs and reptiles. So we had kind of a fish dominance, underwater dominance here. Now we have land-dwelling reptiles. Triassic starts with a capital T, and you turn the stem into an R. Jurassic's a J, and Cretaceous is a K. Triassic means 3, Jurassic refers to the Jura Mountains, and Cretaceous comes from the Greek word for chalk. Now, all of these names come from places or locations where the first fossils were found. So, Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian represent Celtic tribes in the United Kingdom where the first fossils were found. Mississippian and Pennsylvania are kind of obvious. Those are states where you would find fossils from that time. Perm, Russia, and then, like I said, the Jura Mountains, chalk in Greek. You probably know the most about the Mesozoic because dinosaurs are a real big hit with kids and grown-ups alike. Movies like Jurassic World, Jurassic Park, and The Land Before Time. What you probably don't realize is that not all the dinosaurs were alive at the same time. So you would have your Stegosaurus during the Jurassic, and you'd have your T-Rex during the Cretaceous. They wouldn't have met. They were at dramatically different times, just like how you and I are at a different time than T-Rex. There was a major extinction at the end of the Cretaceous. An asteroid hit in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico and caused an extinction. There may be some other factors involved as well, but at the end of the Cretaceous, we no longer have dinosaurs in the fossil record. We have some relatives in the form of birds like ostriches and alligators, but no longer would we see our Triceratops, our Stegosaurus, our raptors. So this leads to the Cenozoic. The Cenozoic is the time of mammals. Mammals dominated with the end of that extinction because mammals were able to kind of outlast the damage from the asteroid impact, living in burrows, being more small, not needing as much food, being able to survive on roots. Now, you see this word tertiary here. The symbol for tertiary is T. The symbol for quaternary is Q. It used to be there was a primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. Like 4 time periods. And then geologists realized there was a lot more to the history of the Earth. So they separated the primary and secondary out. The tertiary stuck around even until I started college, but now has been separated into the Paleogene and Neogene. So it depends on if you're, looking at older data or not. Paleogene is a P with a little g. Neogene is an N with a little g. Paleo just means old, neo means new. This would have been a time where mammals really took off and evolved into a lot of different shapes. The quaternary is today. The quaternary is when humans first show up in the fossil record, but it also includes the Ice Age. So I'm going to point out over here real quick. You can see it says Paleogene epochs, Neogene epochs. That's because the Paleogene, Neogene, they're so recent that we have a lot of data. So we can separate them out into tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years instead of millions and billions. So this Paleogene is the same as the one over in the tertiary, separated into 3 parts. The Neogene separated into 2 parts. And then finally the quaternary, which is today, separated to the Pleistocene and the Holocene. Now the Holocene, that's you and me. That's us. That's the last, let's say, 10,000 years. You always hear about movies called 10,000 BC. That's because the Holocene is just the last 10,000 years of history. Prior to that was the Pleistocene, which was the last ice age. There have been other ice ages in the past, but that's the one that shows up in movies, and we'll study that a lot when we talk about glaciers. So that's everything I need you to know right now about the geologic timescale. Let me know if you have any questions, if you need any help going through this. I'm happy to do that.